Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 fetishes that you won't believe. Rule 34 states that if you can imagine it, there's porn of it on the internet. But simple imagination has nothing on the bizarre realities of sexual experience. We've all heard about people who are aroused by feet or dressing as animals or being put in diapers, but how many of us have heard of people being aroused by quicksand, doorknobs, or flatulence? Well, guess what? Today is your lucky day.
Number 10. Flatulence Fetishism. Farts are gross. Any 10-year-old knows this, as does any girlfriend unfortunate enough to experience the notorious Dutch oven. However, it seems not everyone got the message. For some people, there's nothing more erotic than the smell of some freshly baked arse gas. The idea that people can get turned on by farts has been floating around the internet for a while now, but a British psychologist recently made what he claims is the world's first clinical diagnosis of it. His case study involved a guy called Brad who could only get turned on by the idea of someone, male or female, farting in his face. According to Brad, the fetish started when a girl he fancied at school let one rip during a lesson. Apparently, it sparked something in his mind because Brad subsequently spent his spare time trying to trick people into farting in his face, usually by losing bets. He's now the world's only recognized eproctophile, not exactly the greatest claim to fame we've ever heard. Number 9. Hierophilia. Remember that scene in The Exorcist where Linda Blair got intimate with a crucifix? Turns out that wasn't a sign of demonic possession, at least not necessarily. She may have simply been a hierophile. Hierophilia is what we used to call blasphemy. Those afflicted become aroused at the idea of making love in a religious setting or getting themselves off using religious objects. The intention is not actually to offend, this is simply the only way these people can get their motor going. That it manages to upset millions of people in the process is just an unfortunate side effect. Interestingly, the word fetish itself originally comes from religious objects. In the medieval period, fetishes were bits of the true cross or bones of the saints or any other sacred item you might find in a church. Hierophiles are simply combining both uses of the term in a single sacrilegious act. Number 8. Omorashi. Did you ever wet yourself as a little kid? If so, you probably remember it as a pretty embarrassing incident. Really, who could blame you? But if you were into Omorashi, things would be very different and certainly much weirder. Omorashi fans are people who get turned on by the thought of being desperate for a pee. The desire extends beyond the fetishists themselves. For some reason, the sensation of needing a pee does nothing for them, but seeing someone else desperate for a leak sure does. Frequently, the target of their fetish is someone important or dignified. In other words, if your boss was to wet themselves in a meeting, an Omorashi fan would find it less hilarious and more deeply arousing. For those of you who are wondering about the name, it comes from Japan, where Omorashi is very popular. Why might that be? Well, the best answer that we could come up with is, well, because it's Japan. Number 7. Climacophilia. So far, the fetishes on this list have been weird but unlikely to land you in hospital. That isn't the case with Climacophilia. Documented by Jesse Bayring in his book of sexual oddities, Perv, a climacophile is someone who gets turned on by the idea of falling down the stairs. It might sound like this is a particularly cruel form of sadism, but the opposite is true. The very, very few people to have this fetish apparently are more aroused by the idea of tumbling downstairs themselves than seeing someone else do it. In other words, if a climacophile were to watch that freaky scene in The Shining where Shelley Duvall sends a deranged Jack Nicholson crashing through the stairs, they'd want to be Jack Nicholson. Because it's very rare, Climacophilia doesn't have the same sort of dedicated sites as many of these fetishes, which from a public health perspective might be just as well, really. Number 6. Women sinking in quicksand. Not so long ago, every Hollywood adventure film featured a scene where the nubile young damsel would fall in quicksand and have to be rescued. It was a cliched plot device, a way to show how strong and resourceful the hero was and how helpless his female companion. For a generation of young boys, it was apparently also their moment of sexual awakening. Although the quicksand trope has basically disappeared from Hollywood, there are still plenty of dedicated quicksand fetishists out there, and most of them are really old. In a recent documentary, Vice followed a bunch of guys on the modern quicksand scene. Most of them, with few exceptions, were old enough to have grown up with the original Hollywood films. They now spend their days recreating their favorite quicksand moments, using young and attractive ladies to make a quick buck. Generally, the resulting films are pretty safe for work. It seems quicksand fetishists prefer their sinking women to be clothed rather than naked for some reason. Realism, we guess? Number 5. Women failing to start cars. Women drivers, right guys? They're so bad they even have trouble starting their cars. It's sexist, so it must be true. Sorry, did I say true? Because what I meant to say was that it's sexist, so it must feature in some freaky fetish, and boy was I ever right. Pedal pumping is a turn-on largely associated with rural, conservative parts of America. In its purest form, it simply features a video of a woman's foot helplessly depressing a gas pedal while she begs her car to start. Other variations feature whole-body shots so fans can see the woman getting frustrated and upset. That's about it. Neither version features any nudity, and neither ever features a car actually starting. Some experts think this fetish taps into the damsel in distress fantasy many guys have of seeing a helpless woman and coming to her rescue, in this case by starting her car. Others think it's basically a result of America being such a car-orientated nation where automobiles are advertised like sex objects. Whatever the reason, it's hugely popular in Republican-leaning states. Number 4. Girls licking doorknobs. No, that's not a euphemism. There is a genuine fetish that involves images of attractive girls getting down on their knees and licking doorknobs. The girls are fully clothed and the pictures are relatively safe for work. Yet a dedicated website set up in 2011 wound up briefly becoming one of the biggest fetish sites on the internet. The theory behind this popularity is both quite convincing and quite disturbing. Basically, doorknobs are asexual things. Beautiful women on their knees caressing something with their lips is definitely not. It's thought a huge number of guys who see the photo simply discard the doorknob from their mental picture and replace it with something else. We'll give no prizes for guessing what that something else might be. As with Omorashi previously mentioned, this fetish is most popular in Japan and among Western men who enjoy looking at pictures of cute Japanese girls, so that's probably most of them. Number 3. Pteronphilia. After 3 entries with women and girls doing X as their heading, it's nice to get back to fetishes with an actual scientific name. Make no mistake though, Pteronphilia is just as weird as everything else on this list. Specifically, it's a fetish that describes people who get off on the idea of being tickled with feathers. This desire is basically an offshoot of nismalagnia, a similar fetish for being tickled. Nismalagnia is so popular that you can actually make a decent living doing tickle scenes for fetish sites in LA. Pteronphilia, on the other hand, still hasn't had its 50 Shades of Grey moment and is currently regulated to the less lucrative sidelines. It might seem that this is just another version of the damsel in distress trope, watching a woman writhe helplessly while a man tickles her. Yet plenty of sites involve men being tickled by other men, so maybe it's a dominance thing. Number 2. Oculolinctus. Saying you like someone's eyes has long been an accepted way of implying I want to sleep with you. If your desired one is into oculolinctus, you may have to go one further. Far from just gazing into one another's eyes, people with oculolinctus like to get right up close and lick them. Oculolinctus made a splash in the news in 2013 when multiple papers reported that it was the latest trend among Japanese teens. The story was later proved to be a hoax, but the fetish remains very much real. While it's a rare form of sexual attraction, it's certainly not unheard of. Around the time of the Japan story, the Huffington Post managed to interview a woman who considered it the most intimate act a partner could perform. There might be good reason for this fetish. Like the toes, the eyes are incredibly sensitive to even the slightest touch. This makes the licking sensation very noticeable and, for some, very erotic. Number 1. Human males. Don't worry, we haven't suddenly turned either extremely homophobic or extremely anti-straight women. Whatever your gender, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being attracted to human males, provided, that is, you yourself are a human. Our story here involves Lucy the chimpanzee. You may have heard of her because in the 1960s and 70s, Lucy was raised in a suburban home as part of a human household. The experiment to try and tame Lucy's wild side was generally considered a failure. However, it did have a lasting impact on Lucy's sexuality. As a grown chimp, Lucy showed no interest whatsoever in the males of her species. Instead, she reserved all of her affections for human men. As a young adult, Lucy developed an obsession with Playgirl magazine. According to Jesse Baring's book, Perv, Lucy used to service herself to the hunky male centerfolds, occasionally rubbing her monkey junk right up against the pictures. If only someone had thought to introduce her to a zoophile, and we might now be well on our way to producing an unstoppable man-chimp army.
So I really hope you found that video interesting and that you learned something new. If you did, please give us a like below, it really helps out. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, click that button on the screen now or below the video, because you'll get other brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, over there on the right are a couple of other sex-related lists, so be sure to check those out. One is the top 10 octogenarians gone wild, and below that, the top 10 myths about sex. So be sure to check those out, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, and thank you for watching.